Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran and it's time to finally end this alpha video for all the class updates with the priest. The final class in the list, and we have a special surprise. We have ourselves a level 58 priest with some gear from questing. We have all the priest abilities here for us to actually look at and examine, and all the buffs and all the maximum ranks of abilities. So let's just dive into the priest. We're excited right now because we got the Venthyr, the Revendreth portion of the alpha for us to quest on, and there's the vampire dudes all over the place, the scenery. I mean, the buildings look amazing. There is no music, which is the sad part, but everything else is awesome. So we're going to take a look at where the priests are at on the alpha, like we did with all the other classes, examining them, not particularly looking at the covenant abilities, but rather taking a look at where the specs are this early in the alpha. So let's take a look at where priests are at currently on the alpha. Again, we're not on max level characters with the best possible gear that's like pre-raid or anything, so the stats are going to be all over the place, and I can only get so much while questing. We don't have everything finalized. We're going to look at all the basic abilities, some of the talents, some of the bit of a gameplay, and I'll try to find a workaround here in the Revendreth area because there's no training dummies for us to really hit, but it can still show you a little bit of what the gameplay would look like. Anyway, let's jump into the priest. We'll start off with the shadow, moving into disc, and finish up with holy, as those are the specs that I'm gonna go from the ones that I kind of sort of understand the best, since this isn't my main, to holy, which is the healer spec that I probably understand the least out of the three, but I have the general idea. Here we go. Take a look at these. We have Desperate Prayer available for Shadow Priest now. 1.5 minute cooldown, increases max health by 25%, and instantly heals you for that amount. So essentially it's just like a personal heal that also extends your own health a little bit, making you a little tankier. 1.5 minute cooldown makes this ability pretty short. It doesn't have the same Holy Priest thing where the more damage you take, the shorter the cooldown this ability is. They just set it at 1.5 on the alpha. Maybe Holy Priest still has that extra benefit. We'll take a look at them spec by spec basis if there's small adjustments. But for this, for Shadow, this is awesome. Shadow, I feel like, is already squished in PvP. It's pretty squished in PvE as well, and having an extra defensive is just overall good. The spell magic is still in the game. Costs quite a bit of mana as of right now, so I don't know how often you'll be able to spam, but it still has the same effect as on live. Fate is still in the game. We didn't take anything from the BFA into its base kit, like the dodge with PvP, which hopefully they'll still keep, or the absorb for magic, which would have been awesome. Leap of Faith is still in the game, 1.5 minute cooldown with Levitate for the float. Mass Dispel is still the same, however, you won't see the OG Mass Dispel that takes off immunities from enemies until you get to a higher level. So this is a separate rank as you level, but at level 58 we already have that rank, so essentially eventually at max level you would have this as back to business. Mind Blast, available for all specs. For Shadow, it generates insanity and does quite a bit of damage. Mind Control is still in the game, does not work on demonic, undead, mechanical beings, so on just about everything else it works. Mind Seer, base for all specs, no mana cost at all, generates sanity over duration per target hit. So for Shadow Priest, you'll still be using this at a certain cap of enemies compared to your basic Mind Flay. You also get Mind Soothe, that's a new one. Mind Soothe is new. Soothes the target, reducing its range at which will attack you by 10 yards. Only affects humanoids and dragonkin. Does not cause threat, lasts 10 seconds. This isn't going to be some major ability. You might have maybe some sort of an area in a Mythic Plus dungeon where you can soothe an enemy, walk by them without needing Rogue, Shroud, Concealment, Stealth, and be able to res your allies later. It'll maybe have some PvE uses, but it's a cool flavor ability to add to Priest. Power Infusion is the one I've been grinding my ass on the Priest in order to get. Power Infusion, 2 minute cooldown, infuses the target with power for 20 seconds, increasing haze by 25. It doesn't say your power, it says power of a target. There's a 2 minute cooldown, 40-yard range, and if I can find an ally that I might be able to shield, actually none of these guys are shieldable, but let me see if I can find, just to make sure this works properly. Dude, wait, there's an ally? Can I shield you? I can buff you. Can I power forward infusion you? I can grant an ally haze by 25%. Essentially, it's a mini bloodlust that you can grant to a target. It can be for yourself. It can be for somebody else. That's going to be kind of weird in the gameplay. I'm a little too close to a mount, but that's going to be really weird for the priest gameplay. You can power fusion not just yourself, but someone else. So people said already this might be a toxic thing that people will be bringing priests to buff others. So essentially you're a buff bot. But I don't know. We'll talk about it later. Power Word 42 is still here. Only 5% of stamina increase, but they also reduced the buffs that the warrior and the mage provide to only 5% of either intellect or attack power. So this is all equal. Power Word Shield is available for all specs now, which is cool, so even Holy gets it, so every spec is going to have at least a shield. Psychic Scream is still in the game for the big AoE on a 1 minute cooldown. Resurrection is going to be how you'll resurrect your dead allies by themselves. Shackle Undead to control undead for 50 seconds. Shadow Word Death, baseline for all specs, it will do damage back to you if it doesn't kill the target. So great PvP capabilities right there, and Shadow Word Pain for every spec as well. Looking at Shadow Priest specific abilities, we have Dispersion on a 2 minute cooldown. It'll disperse you into pure energy. I also got to change one of these actually. Here we go. So, because one of my abilities is going to look weird, not the original version. But Dispersion reduces you into pure energy. You take 75% less damage for 6 seconds. Unable to cast spells. You move faster. Your sanity is reduced. So, mostly the same as it is on live. Mind Flay will do single target damage, channeled, no mana cost at all. 14 sanity over its duration. Mayan Vision will allow you to see through the eyes of an enemy or an ally. It's not an ability you're going to use all that often. It looks like a Shadow Priest only spec, but everybody has access to it, so it shouldn't really matter. I don't know why it's on a spec specific instead of class specific. We have Purify Disease for your Shadow Priest to be able to remove diseases from allies. Shadow Mend is still going to be, you would think Flash of Light would have been the ability, but Shadow Mend is going to be the ability available for Shadow Priest for self-heals. Has the same thing on live, where if you heal somebody and they're in combat, when you heal them, they'll take a little bit of damage over time. Afterwards, if things go bad. Then we have Shadow Fiend, on a 3 minute cooldown, summons a Shadowy Fiend to attack your enemy. 3 sanity each time Shadow Fiend attacks. Shadow Form, which assumes Shadow Form increasing the spell damage dealt by 10%. No other buffs outside of that. Silence for a 45-second cooldown to give you a silence on an enemy. Vampiric Embrace on a 2 minute cooldown. 85% of the single target damage you do for Shadow abilities will also heal you or allies. Vampiric Touch will still do damage over time. Heals you for 50% of the damage done, which is still a very, very low number right now. If Vampiric touches a spell, it still will horrify the enemy in PvP, generating 6 insanity. Void Eruption will do AoE damage to everyone as it does on live. Transforms your Void Eruption to a Void Bolt. It requires 60 insanity with the talent of Legacy of the Void, but normally it would be something along the lines of 90 insanity to activate. Focus Will is still going to be a defensive. As it take damage, you reduce the damage slightly by 5%, stacking up to twice, I believe. Maybe they removed the stack completely, actually. We need to check it when I get hit by enemies. Hallucinations, so if you are trying to help out your allies and using friendly, useful spells, instead of casting Mind Flay constantly, then you'll be rewarded with Sanity. Mastery will increase the damage of your dots. Your basic abilities like your Mind Blast, Mind Flay, Mind Seer, Void Eruption, Void Bolt by set amount. Mind Blast rank 2 reduces the cooldown of Mind Blast by 7 seconds. So right now with haste it's 7.1. And I have on my character 13% haste, which doesn't seem like a lot, which it really isn't. Shadow Apparitions are on Shadow Pain on crits will send apparition that will do some shadow damage. Void Bolt is a little different now, so you'll still have the same Void Bolt, but it can now be cast while you are Mind Flaying. So that's a little weird to play with. It feels a little clunky at times, but you can cast Void Bolt now while you're Mind Flaying, which is weird. It really does kind of eat into your rotation a little bit when it comes to playing your Shadow Priest. I don't really know what to say much about that. I'll show you in gameplay what it looks like. And then Void Form, of course. Grant yourself into Void Form, increases spell damage you do by 20, reducing the cooldown of Mind Blast by 1.5 seconds, grant additional 0.5% haste over 1 second, sanity will drain increasingly fast until it reaches 0 Void Form. When it comes to talents, the Shadow Priest isn't really all that different. There are a couple talents that are slightly changed though. You have level 15, Fortress of the Mind. Mind Flay and Mind Blast deal extra damage, generate insanity. Shadow Insight will give you proc for Mind Blast. And Shadow Ward Void will give you 2 charges of Mind Blast essentially. At only a slightly longer cooldown, but better control of sanity overall. It generates slightly more insanity, 2 by 1. Level 25 is the same as live. Body and Soul, Sin, Land, and Tangibility are all the same as it is on live. Level 30, same stuff as live. Just the Fate will give you that execute potential. Misery will allow VT to also apply Pain for cleave and dot management. And Dark Void will be used for big AoE dot damage and apply Shadow Ward Pain to everybody. Level 35, you have Last Word to reduce the cooldown of silence by 15 seconds. Turn your fear into an AoE Mind Bomb Fear on a 30-second cooldown, or Psychic Horror for a stun on a 45-second cooldown for 4 seconds. Level 40, we have Auspicious Spirits, which will make apparitions do more damage and generate sanity. Shadow Crash for the big AoE shadow damage and sanity. And now Death's Madness, since normally your Shadow Word Death will be here. Death's Madness, if a target dies within 6 seconds after being struck by Shadow Word Void, you gain 40 insanity over 4 seconds. The cooldown of Shadow Word Death is reset, so essentially if you are in a dungeon situation and you can really get those deaths back to back, or in a boss fight where those ads come out and you can death them, you'll gain a lot more sanity generation, so you can stay in void form longer, and then overall your cooldowns of your Shadow Word Death will be reduced because it'll be instantly coming off as soon as the enemy dies shortly, and you could use it into the boss or into other enemies. Level 45, we have Linger Insanity to give you haste the longer you stay in void form. Mindbender to be a slightly stronger cooldown than Shadow Fiend. Use it more often, generates, I believe, more insanity. Yes, it does, double the insanity. Or Void Torrent, that will essentially your artifact weapon ability from Legion, but like a weaker version, and I've never actually used this talent ever. We have level 50 with Legacy of the Void, making your Void Eruption cast time reduced by 40%, allowing you to get into Void form at 60 insanity rather than 90, and Void form increases spell damage by additional 5%. Dark Ascension to pop into the Void form anytime you want to, a minute cooldown. Or a change Surrender to Madness. 2-minute cooldown, instantly gain 100 sanity when and cast Void Eruption on your target. For the next 25 seconds, your insanity generation generating abilities generate 100% more insanity, and you can cast while moving. If the target does not die within 25 seconds of using Surrender to Madness, you die. If the target does not die, so I never actually tried this. It looks like it doesn't work on a specific enemy. I've never actually had a reason to use this ability ever, so we will actually take it for a spin just to make sure this works properly. So if this marks a specific enemy, you would essentially want to use it on like an ad that comes up, so you'll be able to nuke the ad as soon as possible during Surrender to Madness window, so then you don't die. So this will be good and useful in some fights that will have an ad. However, in a single boss fight, you would never use this unless you can have like another, like a priest or someone, give you wings so you don't die from Surrender to Madness, but a 2-minute cooldown could be quite strong. They changed this ability a little. It doesn't really sound like something people will use regularly, but it definitely has potential. Alright, I'm going to try to show you guys the best that I can of the playstyle for Shadow Priest. There's no trained dummies in the Venthyr area, so instead I will try to fight enemies that don't have the highest possible level about them. So priests are basically back to the OG gameplay they used to have, or think of a priest how you would play right now without any of the essences or traits. And priests are very not happy, first of all, about how Shadow plays. I'll tell you guys my thoughts on where I think Shadow is at, but I will tell you what other people think about Shadow Priest, where it's at, how it plays. There's quite a few people that are pretty unhappy with where the spec has been going. But you'll open up usually with something like Mind Blast, get your dots up on the enemy. Just gotta maintain your dots. Now that you have Shadow Word Death, you'll want to be using it on an enemy. I'll stun this guy for a second just to keep him at bay. You build up resources until you dive into Void Eruption, and you'll be using your filler for Mind Flay. I forgot I need to get it to 90 in order to get into Void Eruption. And then from there you'll gain your Void Bolt. From there you want to keep Void Bolt in order to maintain your dots. So dot gameplay is going to be kind of taking a back seat, and you'll try to use your Void Bolt as often as possible to prolong your dots. And of course you also have Shadow Word Death to also help land and execute. What's cool about it, I do like it that it has Shadow Word Death, so at least it's an extra ability for you to press if anything. Yo, I'll pop that extra haste, and oh my god, the playstyle feels so much better. I think Priest is going to be really a creature of gear. It's going to be a little bit of time before you can really get that much haste to really continue and just pumping out sanity a ton. The one playstyle that is really weird is the Void Bolt interaction with your Mind Flay. So Mind Flay, Void Bolt, while I'm Mind Flaying. So essentially you want to make sure you have a full Mind Flay rolling so you can Void Bolt in. That feels a little weird. That feels a little bit janky. It's not bad, and it's essentially is more damage, but some priests have said this playstyle is most likely going to leave you as a turret. You'll just be spending a lot of time standing still, just turreting damage, and doing these weird resets with your Mind Flay where you don't finish a Mind Flay. You'll just restart it to make sure you can get a Void Bolt in between of them to be efficient. Which feels weird, I'm not gonna lie, it feels really, really weird. I don't know if I like it or not. And now the spec itself comes with Power Infusion. So now you can bring a priest just for the Power Infusion buff, which might be a little toxic. If you're a priest, you see this buff, you're like, hey, I want to use it for myself, but this ability can be used on others. Some people have made concerns. What if you just stack a bunch of Shadow Priests with the damage and they'll just buff that one guy that does giga damage with all this haste outside of Bloodlust? So in a sense, priests have an ability now that can get them brought into groups because they can buff themselves or better buff others. Imagine granting this haste buff to a healer so he can get through certain hard mechanics. Or you can grab this buff to another DPS who has a very high playstyle with haste, because this essentially is a Bloodlust worth of haste for 20 seconds, like a Desert Warlock or something. Chuck out a bunch of Chaos Bolts to get through a mechanic very easily. This is a very malleable cooldown that isn't necessarily to be used for you. Will some priests use it for themselves? Of course. It might be huge for priests, especially when they do a beginning level damage. But in a group setting for raids, this could be a powerful utility. Now, how powerful is it? Some people have said, what if you just stack a raid, like, let's say you stack 10 players, some healers, some tanks, big DPS, the rest of them are just priests, like Shadow Priests, just to buff that one guy to oblivion. It might happen in the worst case scenario, but I don't think so. I don't know. That's just some of the concerns that people have had. Some people said maybe it might be a little toxic just being a priest, and it's like, hey, I have Power Infusion. I would like to use this buff for myself. It's my ability. But then let's say your guild leader tells you, hey, you have to use it on Joe or Bobby because they do more damage than you. You're just a priest. You don't really matter. You just break this buff. Hey, Power Infusion priest, what's up, my man? Hey, drop me down the buff, thank you. So it could create toxic environments, I guess some people have mentioned. Having Power Infusion, I think, is a massive tool that could make this spec and class overall insane. I feel that ability by itself could be humongous, but if you're someone who isn't happy to be able to provide others a buff, like a Boomkin, because the way I look at it is essentially it's almost like a Boomkin's Innervate, right? A Boomkin is going to apply Innervate for an ally, not because it increases their damage, but increases the group's survivability. So if you're someone who values group content and helping out the group, I think priests are going to be a great choice. Power Infusion seems very strong, insanely strong. Hell, you will bring a Disc Priest just because of Power Infusion, even though they're not the greatest healer. Hey, in Mythic Pluses now, they bring Power Infusion. You might not use this ability on yourself all the time, you might use it on others, but the malleability that it has, I think it's good. But then again, maybe that's just how I look at it. Some people have looked at it and think that it's not that great, the fact that it is a cooldown, but not your cooldown. So there's a good chance that other people will be using it for themselves for selfish reasons. I guess there's a possibility for it, but I think with Power Infusion is way too strong, so it's going to get priests into groups almost guaranteed. However, let's take a look at the Disc Priests to see where they are at on the alpha right now. Take a look at Disc Priests. For the most part, you have the same abilities in the toolkit as Shadow. Not a lot of abilities really feel new. You do have Mind Blast. It is a little different. It'll do small damage to the enemy, but prevents a large amount of damage. That's essentially a mechanic that's taken away from Smite. So Mind Blast will be an ability you'll be using as Shadow Priest. It costs quite a bit of mana, but the damage prevention could be pretty big, especially if it's an enemy from afar that you can hit early. Could be huge overall, does contribute to Atonement, so this could be massive for the healing of Priest. Mind Seer is also in the game. You can Mind Seer enemies now. It says generates insanity. It doesn't generate insanity, but this is taken from Shadow Priest directly, added to the other specs. So having a bit of AoE shadow damages, Disciple Priest with your Atonement could be great. A base ability that's better than Holy Nova. You have Mind Soothe, you have Power Infusion in order to grant allies power, Power Word Fortitude, Absorb Shield, Shackle Undead, Shadow Word Death, which is great for PvP, but also great execute damage and Atonement damage and Smite as well. Take a look at the Disc Priest actual abilities. We have Holy Nova, still in the game, Mass Res for Mass Res, Mayan Vision, Pain Suppression, 40% damage, 3-minute cooldown, Penance for damage or healing an ally. It does quite a bit of healing, does a bit of damage. Power Word Barrier, 3-minute cooldown, 25% damage reduction in AoE. Power Word Radiance, 30-second duration, or applies Atonement for 60% of its normal duration, so not baked from BFA or another trait. Purge the Wicked, which is going to be Pain, but I haven't purged the Wicked, but yes, Pain. Still available. Purify to dispel magic and disease. Rapture to create you better shields and no cooldown on the shield, spamming on 1.5 minute cooldown, 10-second duration. Shadow Mend, same as Shadow Priest in life. Shadow Fiend for 3 minutes. We have Atonement, so part of the damage you do with Power Word Shield, Shadow Mend, Power Word Radiance, apply Atonement, target for 15 seconds. Spell damage heals on all targets affected by Atonement. For 50% of the damage done, Focus Will give you extra Damage reduction as you take damage. Grace increases healing absorption increase by 22% based on mastery on targets with Atonement, and Power of Dark Side as your dot penance, or as your dot for Purge the Wicked or Shadow Word Death ticks. It has a chance to empower your penance, increasing its effectiveness, means healing or damage by 50%. In the talents, there's not really a lot of changes. In the first row, it's exactly the same as Life. Schism is most likely going to be your go-to ability, as it does quite a bit of damage, and with more abilities to do damage, like your Mind Blast, like your Shadow Word Death, it could be quite huge. Level 25 talents, Body and Soul, Masochism, and Angelic Feather are all the same. Then we have level 30 with Shield Discipline, Mind Bender, and Power Word Solace, all the same. Level 25, you can either reduce the cooldown of your Psychic Screen by 30 seconds, Dominate Mind in a dungeon or raid setting to control an enemy for a bit on a 2-minute cooldown, or Shining Force for the big knockback. Level 48, we have Sins of Many, which is the same. You do extra damage, but the more atonements you have, the less damage you do. Contrition, which nobody ever uses. When you heal with Penance, everyone with the atonement is healed for a little bit extra. Shadow Covenant is a little different, and last time I tested, it did not work. Instantly heals the target and 4 other injured allies for quite a bit of healing at fairly low mana, and increases all shadow damage you deal by 25% for 7 seconds. During this period, you're unable to cast any holy spells, essentially forcing you to use your shadow-based abilities in order to do the most amount of damage. There's a few abilities that do a lot of shadow damage. You're going to take a look at your Minds here. Shadow Word Death, Mind Blast, and I believe Penance is a holy spell too. It does holy damage. Essentially, it would be a holy spell. You'll still be able to purge the wicked to dot up everybody, and also Schism will be there in the game as well. So this will limit you with how many abilities you can use. Last time I checked it, it just didn't work, but the idea behind it, where you really just succumb to the damage portion of the priest rather than the healing portion, is interesting. Level 45, we have Purge the Wicked to replace your Shadow Word Pain, so you can spread on enemies easier with your Penance. Divine Star, which I don't ever use, and Halo, which kind of gets used sometimes. We have level 50 change. Light's Decree is different. Allies healed for a bit when they gain Power Word Barrier, and healed again when it expires. So as you drop Dome on allies, when it drops, you heal allies. So everybody's going to have to pre-stack instead of moving to the shield. And when the shield fades, you are going to provide pretty big heal to everybody as well. Luminous Barrier will place your barrier on a 3-minute cooldown. Instead of a shield on top of an area, you just shield everybody around you. Extra damage prevention and evangelism to extend the duration of all your active atonements by 6 seconds. So the playstyle for Disc Priest isn't going to be all that different as it is on live. You're simply just going to be dotting up enemies, especially in massive groups, maintaining atonements on allies, and whenever you don't need to emergency heal your friends, you'll be doing damage. That's what I essentially enjoyed about Disc Priest the first time I really ever tried it. It didn't really feel like a healer. And now you have more tools to do damage with and heal allies, like Mind Blast. Mind Blast will just assault the enemy, making them do slightly less damage as prevention, which can be good for maybe 1 or 2 auto attacks in higher end dungeons. But essentially, it is going to be an extra ability that does quite a bit of damage to increase the healing that you provide for your allies. Like this guy over here. You actually just start hitting all the targets that he is hitting, which actually I shouldn't even be able to see because we are supposed to be in a different phase. Start AoEing. And you can see he is actually getting a decent heal out of it. He's actually getting a decent heals off of that ability. He's taking a little bit of damage. We gotta make sure you protect our friend, and we'll do a bit of AoE. He actually gets healed from it, which is awesome. Oh, that was such a good move. Man, this guy's a pro. This guy's amazing. Who is this man? He's actually super good. Take the aggro off me, friend. Innervate, hit me with Innervate. Here we go, blast him with Power Infusion. Now you'll be able to provide allies with Power Infusion, so they'll be able to do even more damage. Isn't that so cool? As a Disc Priest, you're finally the pure support class you could be. Do a little bit of damage, provide buffs to allies, heal them at the same time, so essentially you're as supportive as it comes. Right now the numbers I heard are not that great in dungeons, otherwise I'd jump into some dungeons, because it seems to be the weakest spec by all measures, but that's going to be better with balancing as Blizzard does it. But in terms of the playstyle, I personally enjoy Disc Priest. And finally, we have ourselves the Holy Priest. This is a spec that I more or less understand the basic ideas behind, but it's not a spec that I spend any extended amount of time, I'd say, playing and understanding. So I would say I have far more experience with Disc Priest than Holy. However, Holy is looking really insane. Like, in terms of the utility, it's probably like the It's like where all healing specs originate from. Holy does a little bit of everything that all the other specs do. Let's take a look at where Holy is at right now in its abilities. On base abilities, you have still Desperate Prayer, and the rest of the toolkit is the same. You have Mind Blast, so now it's interesting with Power Infusion, so even more utility you bring to groups. You have Shadow Ward Pain, you have Shadow Ward Death, you have Shield, so now you essentially have some preventative damage absorption. It's not strong, but you have it, which could be something that you would use on a tank or somebody a little bit ahead of a fight, and that's another extra utility that a Holy Priest brings. You don't have Master or anything that buffs this damage, but having it ahead of time and having something to prevent some form of damage, it's kind of a big thing for Priest. Having Absorb is better than having none. Then we have Holy based abilities. You have Circular Healing. That's now baseline for the spec, so that's interesting. Blizzard decided to take it off of talents and make it a base ability. Heal target and 4 injured allies within 30 yards of the target by quite a bit, with a fairly short-ish cooldown. Divine Hymn is still there as a big channel, similar like a Tranquility ability. Guardian Spirit is going to be something that saves your tank, and the effect of this ability is it'll increase also healing by 60%, prevents them from dying. The sacrifice terminates the effect. If let's say the tank dies while this ability is on him, they'll come back with 40% of maximum health, castable while stunned, so you can use this in order to save a tank while you CC it. But massive damage that will be like an instant one-shot will still kill them. You have Heal, which is a long cast but efficient heal for an ally. Holy Fire for a bit of holy damage over time. Holy Nova, which again I never really use even on the disc based. Holy Word Chastise for a little bit of CC on an enemy. It cooldowns reduce the more damage you do with smites. Holy Word Sanctify, which is your big holy word for big AoE healing. The more of prayer healing as you use will reduce the cooldown of this ability, and Serenity, the more heals or flash heals you use, the faster its cooldown is going to be. So these abilities all have a cooldown, but can be reduced depending if you're using single target heals, AoE heals, damage-based abilities, so you could kind of control the cooldown of these abilities as well. Master Direction is still going to be a way for you to res allies. Mayan Vision, Prayer of Healing still does AoE healing on a targeted ally. Prayer Mending is instacast. I don't remember if it being insta, but maybe that's something I might have missed because I don't play Holy that much. But this ability is insta, so you're able to spread a bunch of Prayer of Mendings on multiple allies, and these heals will kind of bounce around. It's great that it's instant, so this will be great on when it comes to movement. It costs quite a bit of mana, however. Purify, we got Renew for an instant hot. Symbols of Hope to give that mana regen for your allies, so that's something interesting that Holy has, but people don't really bring Holy for the mana regen yet right now in BFA. Makes you wonder if with the Spirit Totem coming back for Rest of Shamans for that mana regen, and Priest with their Symbols of Hope, I wonder if that will change the playstyle and the meta for healers overall. Like, are you actually going to have healers that will be there just for the mana regen in the future? Focus will reduce the damage you take, stacking up to 2 times. Echo, Master of Light, you direct healing, also apply an extra healing over time based on your mastery. And when you die, become a Spirit of Redemption, and you'll try to keep your allies alive for as long as you are around. So as the Holy Priest, base abilities, spec abilities. Take a look at the talents. We don't really have a lot of new stuff. For the most part, it's all the same as live. We have Enlightenment, Trail of Light, and Enduring Renewal, still the same as live. Angel's Mercy with Perseverance and Angelic Feather are all the same. Angel Mercy has a cooldown reduction thing to it as a talent, which I thought it was baked into the base ability of Desperate Prayer, but I guess it isn't. Holy Cosmic Ripple on level 30 with Guardian Angel and Afterlife, all the same with your utility for Psychic Voice, Censure, or Shining Force. There's a slight change here on level 40. You have Surge of Light, which on Flash of Lights or a certain ability, healing spells and smite have an 8% chance to make an next Flash of Light instant cost of mana stacks up to 2 times. Binding Heal to give you cooldown reduction faster for Holy Word Serenity, as well as sanctifies you healing 3 targets, a target, yourself, and someone else. And Prayer Circle is you have basic Circle of Healing as a base ability, but now there's a talent. Using Circle of Healing reduces the casting move of Prayer of Healing by 30% for 8 seconds. So this is a buff. So this actually I like a lot. I think this could be really good in groups, because when you cast your Circle Healing, you can now cast Prayer of Healing, just speed cast a bunch of them. So when it comes to like speed healing a bunch of allies, this could be a really interesting combo. I kind of like the idea behind it. We have Benediction at level 45. Your prayer Mending has a 25% chance to leave a renew on each target with how many of those you can put out. It's a lot of hots. Divine Star, which again, I don't use it ever. Halo, which I think is actually used for Holy Priest, but maybe Benediction is the better choice right now. Level 50, we have Light of the Arrow, Apotheosis, and Holy Word Salvation, which is a huge cooldown that I think is still going to make Priest something of a competitor when it comes to putting out the big green numbers everywhere. The Holy Priests are not really all that different in terms of the playstyle. They are, for the most part, well, the same. They don't really change too much. The Priest itself has a bit more utility now with the fact that it can do damage on itself. It doesn't have that absorption for damage with Mind Blast. Now you can Mind Blast an enemy, put Shadow Word Pain on them, put maybe a Holy Fire on the enemy as well, and then start smiting the living hell out of the enemy too. You don't really have that Atonement healing like you would for a Disc Priest, but you can actually put some damage out. You have actually quite a bit of abilities to do deeps, which is interesting for Holy. I tried to make a DPS Holy build when Recount still worked. It's not like you will actually be able to make some crazy Holy build. It's all about damage or anything. So don't hold your horses on that one. But it is interesting the fact that I can hit an enemy for a bit. In terms of the spec itself, you also bring in Power Word Infusion, which is huge for all priests in general. I don't know if, I mean, if anything, this makes priests, I think, just a little bit better, Holy, to bring into dungeons or raids, just because you provide this buff. So if, let's say, Holy Priest or Disc Priest were the worst healer in the game, and you would bring him for certain utilities, like Holy with this throughput and variety of different heals, from HOS to direct heals to emergency heals to AoE heals to group heals to ground heals, whatever you want. Or you bring Disc Priest for a little bit of damage, Atonement, big ramps with Atonement, or Pain Suppression and Barrier. Whatever utility you want, you also get Power Infusion on top of it, which I think will make the spec a competitor. Whether they use Power Infusion on themselves to emergency heal the hell out of an ally, or whether they use it on somebody else. I think it's just a lot of utility that you bring in as a class in general, which is crazy. And I think that's all more or less what's going to make Priests, I think, super strong is Power Infusion. In terms of how Holy feels, it doesn't really feel bad to play at all. It feels pretty base. It doesn't really feel like it's anything different, I guess is the best way to put it, which I guess isn't a bad thing at all. Like, there's a lot of classes change, but for the most part, Holy Priest didn't really change too much, and it looks like your numbers in terms of just raw healing on the alpha have been really nice. So if anybody is playing Priest, most people are playing Holy right now instead of Disc, where Disc numbers, you know, this is early alpha, but the numbers right now are lagging behind, so it's just something Blizzard would need to tune at a later time. This classic definitely could see change and be brought in for certain fights depending on what Covenant ability you have. Now, we haven't looked at Covenant abilities here in this video, and I'm not planning on it. I would like to wait until we have like a full build on the alpha where we can make a level 6 to choose our Covenant ability so we can play with all the stuff and maybe some preset, pre-raid level 60 gear so we can truly test the numbers once they're finally tuned and such against one another. But I think the spec has potential. But yeah, this class is full of abilities. I mean, look at my bards. I have so many more abilities that I don't have the key bindings for all of them. So Priest is going to be, at least Holy Priest, is going to be a very, very busy spec to play with. And if you like a busy spec with a lot going on for it, then I think you'll be pretty satisfied with Holy. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video. This was a long one to record. There was a lot of stuff for me to go over, but I hope you guys enjoyed it either way. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys let me know what you think about Priest. Right now, if I had to describe the Priest, from my perspective, this class seems okay. It's not finalized, so I can't really say if it's going to be good or not just yet. But it definitely doesn't feel bad, far from it. But if you were to, let's say, ask the general Priest community, the sentiments would be a little bit of pessimism and maybe even depression when it comes to Shadow Priest. Well, I'm not really feeling like Shadow Priest is looking that good right now, so it really has to improve. But some Shadow Priest mains are saying on forums, for example, that yeah, this isn't really feeling all that great to play. The playstyle feels weird. It really needs something base because it's probably going to end up being the spec that does well with gear, but it's going to feel bad without that gear, and that's the biggest problem. In terms of Disc and Holy, it comes down to lots of potential, but the numbers in the end, the big greens that you put out, that will end up saying which healer is going to be. But when it comes to the playstyle itself, if you like the current playstyle of Disc, I think you'll enjoy the playstyle of Disc in this expansion, at least with what they got so far. If all the talents work properly, then I think it's going to be good. Holy feels pretty base. It feels like a bit of everything. So if you like a versatile healer, Power Word Infusion, I think, will get you into groups. Just that ability alone, being able to use it properly on the right guy, that could be huge. And as long as you can put some healing behind yourself, you're fine. Shadow definitely feels weird. There's definitely something Shadow is missing, and maybe that's just gear. But maybe it's just also mean just not playing it enough and really getting over the playstyle, what it used to be. The whole interaction of Void Bolt and Mind Flay at the same time is weird. And there's certain tiles that just don't work right now. So it's kind of like a boring version of the Priest that we have currently without any of the traits or essences to make it interesting. But it's not bad. It all depends where Blizzard will take it. But it's not I can't say conclusively that it is something that I would recommend right now. But I won't really bash on it either. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts. And I'll see all of you in another video.